On today's show, Artemi Panarin to the Capitals isn't crazy, but it might be reckless.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about this team's inconsistency is screaming for help, but not for desperation. As I think there are still a lot of great building blocks here. How do the Capitals start winning games on a more consistent basis? I'll talk about that. In a season that hasn't gone according to plan, I like to talk about good things around this team. And Alex Ovechkin is still the standard. And that matters more now than it ever has. But just to get it going here, talking about the big news out there, coming out of one of the premier insiders in Elliot Friedman, and the rumors out there circulating about Artemi Panarin, his future with the New York Rangers, and how Friedge mentioned that maybe the Capitals would be a good fit. And one of the reasons he listed is that it is a Russian-friendly team, of course, Alex Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, et cetera, over time. He also mentioned Florida and Colorado. And what do I think that would be a good fit? I'll dig into that in this first segment here, but I think the Capitals should proceed with caution. I think that he would be a good upgrade for this team in the short term, but it's kind of my belief that I think that if they're going to go out and make a big swing, maybe a player that will help them for many years to come and not mortgage the farm in the process. So let's just get into it here. The Capitals should ultimately listen in on Artemi Panarin, but they absolutely should not force it. And a frustrating situation, to be clear, around New York, as I think that, you know, with the coaching change going into this season that I think a lot of people around the NHL thought that the Rangers were going to take some steps forward. And as you take a look at the standings right now, they are definitely on the outside looking in. Only the Blue Jackets are worse than them in the Metro. But like I said, like I've talked about on this show, they have 46 points. The Capitals have 52. That there's not a tremendous amount of separation. It is getting a little bit more so that there is more separation, but still they could go on a heater. Teams could cool off and they could be in it. And what is being said out there more and more is kind of this line in the sand is the Olympic break. He mentioned several different players in that episode. I agree with that sentiment that, you know, going into the Olympic break, that is when teams are going to decide, are we in? Are we out? And oftentimes we hear about that artificial line in the sand around the trade deadline. I think the Rangers are at that point with Artemi Panarin. Is this team perceived to be in the hunt for the playoffs? Have they pushed the panic button, waved the white flag already? Let's talk about why this would work for Artemi Panarin, the Capitals, and ultimately, would he be a good fit here? Because I'll just say it here right off the top, because this is the headline and grabber right now. The biggest takeaway today, Artemi Panarin to the Capitals, is interesting, not inevitable, and it's only worth it if the price stays sane. Let's not get crazy here, right? That, it is one of the intriguing names around the NHL. And to be clear here, it would be an upgrade. Taking a look at his stats here this season in 45 games, 16 goals, 33 assists. Again, it's still 45 games in, but taking a look over the last few seasons, last season 37, the year before 49, the year before that 29, 22 before that. So the guy puts up 20 plus goals. Has since, I guess, 2021. He only put up 17. That was only a 42 game season. Before that, 32-28. So the guy has a history of doing great things. Currently plays the first line, left wing for New York, and would be an upgrade, right? You take a look at it going all the way back to 2015, 2016, when he played with the Blackhawks, of course, with the Blue Jackets, that he has been around. And all things considered, still a dynamic player that could definitely give a team a boost. And like I said, Elliot Friedman doesn't just throw teams out for fun. When he says Washington, that means someone around the league sees this as at least plausible. Now, Elliot Friedman is one of, if not the premier insider in the NHL. And, when he says things like this, might be interested. I think that, of course, he also mentioned Florida. He also mentioned Colorado. Does he want to do it? And Panarin, is interesting. When he was asked about, where do you want to go? He mentioned, he goes, don't ask my agent. Don't ask a lot of other people. Ask me. I'm the guy that's making the decision, and I'm ultimately going to be the one that signs off on where I want to go. So there's that angle of it. And I agree. The Russian connection, right? I think that Panarin and Alex Ovechkin playing on the same team together would definitely be an interesting storyline, right? Because like Panarin, Ovechkin, same language, same agent circles, same comfort factor. And, I think to us Americans, we don't really relate to that as much, that how much can you put into that, being playing on a Russian friendly team? Listen, I think a significant amount, right? That you think back a season, a few seasons, a handful of seasons ago, when you saw that it was Alex Ovechkin and Samsonov and Kuznetsov and Orlov all hanging out together. And when there was COVID going on, how they stuck close together. So it's not just something that's thrown out there. I think, depending on the player and depending on, how well they get along, I think that could be an interesting storyline. I don't know how much that would factor in for Panarin. I think that he looks at the Capitals. I think, if Panarin wants to go to another team, he's going to want to go to a team that's at least in the hunt. And while I think the Capitals are in the hunt and they have Alex Ovechkin on the team, is that enough to move the needle for Panarin? As he has a list of teams that he's willing to go to and teams that he does not want to go. Friedman on 32 Thoughts said it himself, demonstrating you wonder about a team like Washington. You think about the places where, especially like I said, Russian players might want to go. That's not accidental. That's reputation. That's Ovechkin. And something that's not quantifiable, in the fact that you can't look at stats or where the team is at, is that Ovechkin, the greatest goal scorer of all time, that it might be a side thing that he considers anyway. That's 2 decades of DC being a place where Russian stars feel protected, supported, and empowered. And it is. I mean, there's many Russian players that have gone through this team and would welcome him with open arms. Of course, the big part, like I've said, is, not mortgaging the farm. But let's be real here for a second. Panarin, like I said, still produces. Not the youngest guy in the league anymore, 49 points in 45 games, 16 goals, 33 assists on a Rangers team that, like I said, looks kind of broken, surprisingly, that I expected them to take steps forward over last season. And what was the season before, the President's Trophy, that, a team can fall from grace in a hurry, that, the Rangers might be willing to make a trade, to upgrade, to bolster their team, to try to get them in the hunt again, if not this season, in seasons to come. Because once you say intra-division, once you say rental, once you say 2026 first-round pick plus more, that's when it starts to feel a little bit more reckless to me. There's not a situation that I would ever want to entertain where the names like Hudson, Leonard, those kind of players, I'm just not interested. Would Panarin give this team a boost? Yes. Have I said on this show ad nauseum that it's going to cause some pain? Yes. But if I'm going to have some pain inflicted on me, it's not going to be for Panarin. And that's not a knock. Of course, his reputation, his statistics speak for themselves. For me, if I was the GM, if you're going to be able to get it done somewhat pain-free, right? I know that there's going to be some pain involved, but under no circumstances do I ever want to hear the likes of a Hudson, a Leonard, anything of that nature. And that's just kind of where I'm at. If it's multiple players on this team, that's one thing. If it is players that are somewhat upper echelon down in Hershey, fine. But don't be reckless in the regard that you're mortgaging the farm, depleting a farm system in the regard of Hershey and the Stingrays for a guy like Panarin, who's going to give you a boost here for, depending on what kind of contract comes to terms. It's going to be a rental at the end of the day, right? That he has just this year under contract unless they come to some extension. But, tread carefully, I guess is what I'm going to say. Because I'm just going to say it clearly here. The Capitals are not one Artemi Panarin away from winning a Stanley Cup. That's the biggest thing. And, if you are willing to make a big swing, you need a player that's going to have some impact. Is Panarin going to have impact in and of himself? Yes. Is it going to take this team that has struggled as of late and put them in a better position? I'm going to say marginally. Like I've said on the show, systems still need to improve, those kind of things. If you're asking me, the Capitals are 2 forwards and a defender away from being a team to be taken real seriously. And I know Wilson out, these kind of guys. Panarin is going to be an upgrade for sure, but I don't think he's going to be an upgrade enough to make this team much, much better than they are right now. And Panarin, like I said, not old, but 34, turning 35 early next season. If I'm going to go crazy, if I'm going to go crazy mode, I'm going to go with a guy that's in his early to mid 20s, if you're asking me, a guy that has a tremendous amount of upside, because 34, like I said, not old, but when you talk about players like Carlson and stuff being, almost aging out a little bit, all of a sudden Panarin kind of fits into that category. And the cap math does work. If you're curious, $5.65 million in current space, $12.8 million in projected deadline space. And then, of course, you got that LTIR flexibility because of Pierre-Luc Dubois as well. But we know he's going to be coming back sooner than later as well. After the Olympics is what is being said really early. So from a spreadsheet perspective, clean, easy, and doable. But hockey trades aren't spreadsheets, right? They're things that have timelines. And unless Panarin tells the Rangers, the Capitals are nothing, Chris Patrick should not get bullied into overpaying a rival. Just don't do it. And if the Capitals walked away from, this theoretical hypothesis that Elliot Friedman has, then fine. I'm fine with it. I mean, if it could get done and not mortgage the farm, I'm fine with it. But I wouldn't go crazy mode for a guy like Panarin, especially when this team doesn't know exactly what it is. Is this Alex Ovechkin's final season? Are we kind of in the limbo phase where we're kind of resigned to the fact that this isn't going to be the season that we had hoped in hopes of being a much better team next year in the following years post-Ovechkin? Those are all things in the air as well. And also, this can't get ignored. There are off-ice considerations here. That 2024 settlement reported by the Athletics' Katie Strang, that's part of the full picture. Fair or not, teams weigh that stuff. Listen, monitor, do your homework, but don't chase, nostalgia or vibes or anything like that, right? That we know his history, his track record, the back of his hockey card speaks for itself, but let's not go crazy mode for a guy that's going to be 35 at next season here. All right, so coming up here after the break, this team's inconsistency is screaming for help, but not desperation. Straight ahead. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action because right now, every NFL playoff game, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Every game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to bets you like the most. Open the profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boost you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. Now, this is the time of year that I absolutely love. NFL playoff. I loves me some NFL playoff, and FanDuel gets me so excited. I know you're going to love it as well. So make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not done so already, go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. That is lockedoncapitals.supercast.com to get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Capitals compatible with Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts, an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which also includes a group chat just for listeners of Locked On Capitals. That's where you'll find me. So go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. There's also a link in the show notes. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2 here, we're talking about this inconsistent team. A really nice win over Chicago and then fall flat on your face against Nashville. Now, listen, there was some goals scored. It wasn't a complete waste of a game, but it was a game that saw Alex Ovechkin get on the board first. A power play goal. Definitely the momentum was in your favor, and, well, the train went off the tracks in a hurry. So let's get into it here. Here's the truth. The Capitals don't feel bad. They just don't finish games. 60-minute games, all of those things that you hear about really great hockey teams doing, the Capitals have not done within the last weeks or months here, right? And that's way more frustrating. The finishing, when the game is in your grasp and you don't make the most of the opportunity. And Dylan Strome sounded like a man stuck on repeat after the loss to Nashville. He said, quote, "We've got to find a way to bounce back and string a couple together," unquote. Always these post-game pressers are just Captain Obvious answers, right? And, I don't know what ultimately I'm expecting out of a player like Dylan Strome, a guy who leans heavily into analytics. He knows what's working and what's not on every team around the NHL. And I don't think there's any clear answers. And, Spencer Carberry, he seems frustrated. But at the end of the day, I think he's doing what he can do. I think that Chris Patrick needs to make a move. I think that Spencer Carberry would love it if he did, to give this team a boost that just adding a new player to this team would bring, but also to give, some flexibility to add some scoring and a depth defender. I think that would be huge. And how many times have we heard that before? Win one, lose one, hover, repeat. Like I've said on the show, follow the bouncing ball. We're good, we suck. We're good, we suck. We're good, we suck. And it's hard for someone that follows this team, that covers this team, to put a tremendous amount of stock in a big win, right? You think back to the Blackhawks game, on Friday, and you're like, wow, we're in a good space again. We know how to win hockey games, and then all of a sudden, back down to reality against Nashville. And that is one of the things that's especially frustrating about this year's Capitals team. It's something I haven't felt, about this team in years, to be honest with you, that this team and consistency are not friends this year. And looking at the standings, only 14 points separate this entire Eastern Conference. That is razor thin. That is zero margin. This is a prime opportunity to make an upgrade while you are still in the hunt. Chris Patrick, anywhere, are you out there? And Charlie Lindgren nailed it as well, a guy that, has seen some highs and lows of this season. He said, quote, "We're fully capable of stringing together back-to-back wins. It's just consistency," unquote. That is all kinds of word salad to me. We're capable of stringing together back-to-back wins. It's just consistency. I'm going to put that in the calendar or in the calculator and hit equals. It shows question mark. That comment did not make a lot of sense. We're capable of doing it. It's just the consistency. I guess I don't really know what he means by that. And here's why I'm going to push back on that a little bit. Consistency doesn't magically appear when half of your lineup is hurt. Tom Wilson out. Jacob Chychrun 6. Sortif puck to the face. Pierre-Luc Dubois long-term absence, and Protas not fully himself. And I get that. And I'm not trying to minimize it. Tom Wilson leading the team in goals. Jacob Chychrun, massive on the blue line, and also chips in offensively. Sortif, who's been a revelation at the second line center position. Pierre-Luc Dubois, who we've been out, a long time, was really good last season. And Protas, a key contributor as well. Those things are valid. However, the Capitals are not the only team in the NHL going through injury. You've got to find a way to overcome. And like I've said before, the comments that were made last season, right? That, we don't want to mess up the vibes of the locker room, and we don't want to make any big additions to screw up the pH balance of this team. Go ahead and mess up the Petri dish if it means getting this team in a better position, because when you're digging deep and you're calling up a guy like Leeson, right, from AHL as a guy to help fix things, as a stopgap measure, you obviously didn't do enough. So it's legit. It's not noise. And ultimately, that's kind of the spawn of your lineup, right? Wilson, Chychrun, Sortif, PLD, Protas, big names on the Capitals. And Spencer Carberry admitted the issue plainly. He said, our expected goals is like 2.1. We've got to get that up to 4, unquote. So what does that mean? Translated, the Caps control play, but they don't threaten enough. That I don't think that there's a lot of teams out there that play the Capitals and are afraid. They're like, yeah, we know this team. They're really going to give it to us in one period, and then, they're going to lose gas by the third period, or any mix and match of those combinations. They scored twice on the power play, great. But 5-on-5, still grinding for offense. And I think that is fodder, right, for Elliot Friedman, and why the Panarin rumor even exists, that we need a bigger name to help fix this team, right? And it's not because the Capitals are panicking, but because this offense lacks a fear factor when games tighten. Spencer Carberry said it in the post-game presser. He said, we cannot expect that much from a 40-year-old Alex Ovechkin anymore. He can still score with the best of them, right? But he's not Alex Ovechkin of 20 when he was a 27-year-old man. And listen, January, 16 games in 31 games, right? All the excuses that are rolled out here that, injuries and the Olympics are coming. Yeah, every other team. And this stretch will either bank points and stabilize the season or expose the limits of this roster. And all arrows are pointing at one person, Chris Patrick. You know that this team is not playing well, and you've done zero to address it. Explain yourself. Explain yourself to the Capitals fans, the ones that pay for the streaming packages, the ones that pay money to go to the games, the concessions, the everything, that this ostensibly could be Alex Ovechkin's final season in the NHL, and you've done zero to address it. So like I said, this stretch between now and the Olympics and the trade deadline is the Capitals are either in it or they're out. It's quite that simple. And, you take a look at the schedule coming up, that you have the Canadiens, you have the Panthers, you have the Avalanche and the Sharks, these kind of teams coming up here on deck that you're going to get exposed. Either you're in it or you're out of it. And still the questions that we're not out of it yet. But do we want to wait until we're out of it to try to fix it? That part is the distressing part for me as a Capitals fan. All right, so coming up here after the break, talking about good stories, good vibes. That's kind of the theme here of me as of late, that closing out the show, I kind of want to end it on a high note, not just negativity. Alex Ovechkin is still the standard, and why now? That matters more than ever. Straight ahead. New year, new systems. This is the same time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our businesses and think there has got to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communication is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Q-U-O, the smarter way to run your business communication. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're working more opportunities connect with customers. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal, and why I use it at my job, and I love it. And you will as well. If I'm out on the road, doing some work on the road, they can reach me on one channel. There's not texting and multiple different devices. I love Quo, and I know you will as well. It's no surprise Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. So make this year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free plus 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNHL. That is QUO.com/LockedOnNHL. Quo. No missed calls, no missed customers. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. So in the final segment here, we're talking about a season that hasn't gone according to the script for the Capitals. As a fan, many insiders say, yeah, this is kind of the Capitals we saw coming. So Alex Ovechkin setting the standard, lifting the bar on an absolute tear. As of late here, lifting the team, a feel-good story for a team that is not playing some of its best hockey. So let's end this episode with perspective, because while everything around the Capitals right now feels messy, Alex Ovechkin did something that's just rather absurd. 21 consecutive 20-goal seasons. When you think of a GOAT, you think who? What, Tom Brady? The GOAT of the NHL, make zero mistake about it, is the Great Eight, Alex Ovechkin. That's the thing. 21 consecutive 20-goal seasons. Quite something. Only Gordie Howe has more. No one has done it to start a career. The Capitals tweeted it perfectly: 21 consecutive 20-goal seasons. At 40 years old, 917 career goals. Listen, you thought Alex Ovechkin was done when he caught and passed Gretzky. All these milestones keep coming, and they keep going, right? His mantle, his trophy case is going to be jam-packed when he hangs up the skates for the final time. And ultimately, this matters because Ovechkin is still dragging the standard forward. Even now, even in a transition year where there's things in flux here, this could be Alex Ovechkin's final season and all that will follow. And that's why the Capitals can't afford to waste seasons with him still producing at this level. But at this, and this is important, this doesn't mean you torch the future for one swing. The right move is balance. Respect Ovi's window, respect the cap, respect asset value. That, we want to be all in on what could be Alex Ovechkin's final ride, right? But you don't want to do it at the perils of depleting your farm, Hershey and Carolina, right? Or draft picks, those kind of things that we want to do. If we can make a move, do it. But you don't want to empty the cupboard. You don't want to empty the clip, for one season, right? That when you talk about, like I talked about in segment 1 with Panarin, it would be a rental type deal. That's what you don't want. Because make no mistake, Panarin would be electric, no doubt. But the Caps don't need just flash. They need finish. They need health, and they desperately need consistency. That Ovi, at 40 years old, 21st season in the league, is doing what he can do. He's getting a little long in the tooth for picking this team up on his back and going, I'm going to carry you guys across the finish line. He can lift the team, right? But we need the next leaders. We need Tom Wilson back, right? We need those kind of guys. So, it's about perspective, that this team is playing poorly, but you're doing it minus some big pieces and ultimately what needs to change. And until those things, the broken record keeps spinning. Alex Ovechkin is the standard of this team. Why, how it should be judged. He sets a level of excellence for himself and doesn't accept second best, right? That many times you've seen him play injured. You've seen this team out. It appeared to be out of it, but still he finds a way to lift him up. And at the end of the day, that is why Alex Ovechkin wears the C on his chest, right? That he is that leader. But when your team is reliant, on a guy that's 40 years old, to stir the drink in the offense department, that is, an overly clear signal that you need upgrades, that, you have players, you have Wilson, you have Chikrin, these kind of guys out of the mix. And when they're subtracted, your team not only falls flat, it falls flat on its face. That, for all the things that we've heard, great options down in Hershey, why is it that Leeson was the one that's called up? Why is it that it hasn't been Protas? Why hasn't it been Crystal or this or that player that's down in Hershey? That when things hit the fan, if you know what I mean, you need to be prepared. You can't just be reliant on Ovechkin. You can't just be reliant on Tom Wilson, these kind of things. That Alex Ovechkin sets the standard of excellence, but he can't do it alone. Logan Thompson can't do it alone. This needs to be one team pulling on the rope, as Barry Trotz used to say, to get it done, to get it across the finish line, that this is not a one-man band, that this is leadership. This is the team playing well by committee. They got a lot of the raw potential there. You have, an amazing coach, Jack Adams winner last year. I don't think this team has lost its way. They just need to batten down the hatches and figure it out before this whole thing slips out of their hands. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. Ultimately, you are what makes this show successful. And calling all of you, you people that listen to the show each and every day, whether it's on YouTube or on the audio side, first of all, thank you. But I think that you know what you need to do. Go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com, where we can talk Capitals hockey all the time. You get access to the Locked On NHL Discord server, which also includes one for Locked On Capitals. You can talk Capitals hockey all the time. You have an ad-free version of the show. There is so much to love. Go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. There's also a link in the show notes. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holmie, and I'll talk to you again next time.